Welcome to another episode of the Brief on Grief. Of course, I am your host, Walter Sanderson, and I am so glad you could join us. I want to jump right into this episode. I want you to think about something that I have had on my mind, and we all know Shakespeare, the great playwright, and I know that many of you are familiar with many of the plays, but there is always that question by Shakespeare in which it is said, to be or not to be, that is the question. And for this episode, I want to talk about to stay or not to stay. That is the question that somebody has, and you've been grieving and going back and forth with in your current state, in your current relationship. On episode 10, I shared with you that we not only grieve people that we lose deceased loved ones, but many of us are grieving people that are still living. Many of us are grieving people who we are in relationship with. Maybe we've gotten divorced from, had a breakup from, but we still are grieving people that are still living. Somebody saying, I am grieving right now because I find myself stuck in a place. And this can be difficult for all of us at different times. You're saying, I'm not sure if I should move on, or better yet, should I stay where I am? And here it is that I feel grief. If I stay, I'm unhappy. And if I leave, I'm not sure if I'll be happy. But I want you to remember what I talked about in episode 10. Please, if you haven't had a chance to look at it or listen to it, please check out the full episode 10. I told you that your grief will always be magnified by the cost of your inaction. It will always be magnified by the fact that you did nothing and you stayed stagnant in a situation without any action at all. And I want to say this especially for young women or women, older women, all women together. I want to say this again. You have got to stop negotiating for the things you do not want. In life, you will find that everything in life has an expiration. So when dealing with grief, obviously, we know that our lives have expiration dates. And I'm here to tell you, if everything didn't have an expiration, then we would never grieve anything at all. For some of you, I just want to share some with you. For those of you that know me personally and those that don't, I love to food shop. And I'm always extremely conscious of the items that I select, and regardless of the aisle I'm in. It could be a box of cereal. It could be canned goods. I'm always conscious of the expiration date that's on the item. I'm always conscious of the expiration date on eggs, things like milk, things like the different meats, sell by dates, best by dates. And I'm sure many of you do this as well. I want you to think about this, and I want to make this analogy when it comes to relationships, because I don't want you to think I stopped by to talk about food shopping with you. If you saw a can or you seen a product in the store that expired a month ago, you would likely stay away from it, correct? You likely would not purchase that item. And I'm here to tell somebody today that is contemplating and grieving, should I stay or should I go? To stay or not to stay, that is your question that's been on your heart and on your mind. That you've got to make a decision to move on when relationship or the relationship you're in has expired. Because expired relationships are not healthy for us while we stay in them. So the question for somebody today is, do I stay or do I go? I want to share a couple of things with you on this episode that you should consider and contemplate. And the first thing I want you to consider and contemplate, that I think many of us grieve day in and day out. And if you are grieving this thing and dealing with this or battling this in your relationship, it might be time for you to move on. I know I used a shopping analogy, and so let me go to one aisle. When you go to the produce aisle, there is no expiration date on the fresh fruit, on the fresh vegetables. There is no expiration date. So you've got to do a careful analysis of the actual product. You've got to look it up and down. You've got to look for small details that would indicate that it is no longer good for you and expired. So it is we need to do the same thing in the relationships, that we need to look for certain signs. Don't miss the signs that make you suspicious. But let me help somebody. One way I would say that it's probably time to move on is if, number one, there is mistrust in the relationship. That means when you no longer trust the other person, you don't have trust because your trust has been broken many times through lies, maybe infidelity, just a person that just doesn't seem to be honest, and you don't trust the person anymore. It might be time to move on because this is major. You will lose trust and you will grieve. Watch this. You will grieve and at times lose yourself while staying in a relationship. What I mean by that is that sometimes when there's mistrust, it brings us out of character. We do things that we wouldn't normally do. We act ways that we wouldn't normally act. And it's just not me being myself. And it's all because I lack trust in this person. And therefore, I cannot trust the relationship. And there is no greater grief in our lives. I know we love our parents, we love our children. I'm not here to say whose sorrow should be magnified and minimized, but there is no greater grief in our lives, the grief of losing yourself, losing who you are, your identity, and having no self awareness. This is why it's difficult in relationships to come back from infidelity, especially when you want to reconcile. It's not about forgiveness, but reconciliation requires that I have to trust this individual again. And for somebody, I may not ever regain the trust, or it will take a long time to reestablish it. So if there is distrust, you may want to move on. Another reason you may need to move on and where you're being stuck and you're grieving is if the person you're in a relationship, they refuse to change. Somebody is saying, I've been waiting for weeks, I've been waiting days, I've been waiting months, I've been waiting. For some of you, you've been waiting years for somebody to change. And this causes grief because you are still wondering when it will ever happen. I know someone has heard this before, and I've had a stage play that I wrote dealing with this issue. Let me say this for a woman that is listening: you cannot change a man. And I'm saying that because you cannot change people. It's hard enough for people to change on their own. And if you're dealing with somebody that refuses to change, this may be an indication that you and I need to leave and walk away. Now, I want to talk to you a moment with somebody because I've heard people say they will change. They're trying to change. And I'm not saying that somebody cannot change, but I want you to be clear and I want you to be concise and I want you to be determined to see and understand what change really looks like. Change has got to be intentional and it's got to be practical. So if you find yourself in a place with somebody who is just saying they're going to change and don't change, then I'm telling you, it is just lip service that they're giving you. When somebody really is trying to change, the first step of changing is pre-contemplation, where the person is acknowledging that they are in agreement with you that some change is needed. Pre-contemplation is followed up by contemplation. Maybe this person now starts discussing and doing an analysis of themselves where they start to look in the mirror and go, I need to be better. Those are the first two steps of change. But the third step is the preparation piece. This is a major one. This person is developing a plan. Maybe they need to change the way they talk to you. Maybe they need to battle or deal with an addiction. Maybe it's their anger. but even maybe it's just some self-improvement, but they're making preparation. They're calling up people. They're making scheduled visits and consults to start the process of change. And by the time you get to stage 4, this is where you start to really know somebody's changing. It's not because they said it, it's because they're doing it. And that stage is action. This is the only stage, hear me when I say this, this is the only stage of change that I would say it's okay to stay and have some patience, because it's up to this point, from the pre-contemplation, the contemplation, it's up to this point, even in the preparation, that it's all talk and has been no action up until this point. When there's action, the person is getting counseling for the trauma they may have endured. They're getting help for the things that they need help with. And finally, I need you to know the fifth place that you can see change is where you see a person decides that they are going to continue to be consistent in what they said. And that means you have got to see some maintenance. There's got to be some consistency. And most of the time, when the maintenance is overlooked, you will find when the maintenance is not consistent, you will find that it was short term manipulation. But when there is consistency, the actions become long term habits. Long term habits become a new behavior. And then, and only then, will you begin to move forward from the place you feel stuck of grieving, should I stay or should I leave? And if you decide to move forward, I need you to know that these same stages are essential for you to move forward as well in the healing of the trauma that you dealt with. So to be and not to be, to stay or not to stay, they decide that for you and not you alone. Well, I just want to say thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Brief on Grief, to stay or not to stay. And as always, if you know anybody that you believe that this message may be helpful for, please share it and subscribe to my podcast on Spotify, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. And as always, we all know somebody that is grieving, and that somebody might be you. Until next time on the Brief on Grief.